Hello everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of My Favorite Things. Today we're here with what I think is just one of the coolest cars to come out in probably the last century. It is a 2001 Chrysler Prowler. Now it's probably more colloquially known as a Plymouth Prowler. In 2000, when Plymouth kind of had its journey off into the sunset, Chrysler took it over and it was rebranded the Chrysler Prowler. Now, pretty cool things about this car. This particular unit has under 13,000 original miles on it. Really good shape, really gorgeous shade of blue. A little bit of a 1930s kind of hot rod, maybe a T-bucket design when you're looking at it. That's kind of what it was meant to evoke. That, and also has like the Indy car style wheels out of the chassis here, which is just really cool. Also really weird when you're driving it. Just look off a little bit to the side and there's a wheel over here just kind of doing its own thing. Obviously that's what happens in every car, you just can't see it because they're hidden. Pretty cool little thing. Power plant wise, always been a little disappointed. It could have been something cool, but it wasn't. What we have here is an aluminum block 3.5 liter V6. Pumps out I think somewhere around 253 horsepower. Now that's a pretty pitiful amount of horsepower for something as cool as this. Just Chrysler things, I guess. It could be worse. You got to remember, this was in 2001. Their Magnum blocks weren't pushing out a whole heck of a lot more power than this. Maybe more torque, but not horsepower-wise. The Mustang in 2001 had, I believe, 260 horsepower on a V8. So, you know, we're still kind of in the era of malaise there, where there just wasn't a lot of raw power coming out of things. Obviously there's exceptions because the Viper existed. So, you know, take it what you will. Something else cool about these cars is their rarity. Now, under 12,000, about 11,700 were produced in its entire run from 97 to 2002. That's not many cars. When you deal with 500,000 or more production in modern numbers, that's bona fide rare. But there's a reason for that, you know. It's inarguably cool, but it is also inarguably impractical. You know, it's a two-seat roadster. Storage is rather non-existent. It's got a manual convertible top. Not a whole lot in the way of power, but maybe it's a little more economical then. Visibility, not the best. Not the best at all. The windows are tiny. The rear window is also tiny. The front windshield, tiny. Mirrors, tiny. Cone of visibility, tiny. But do you really need to see other people when they're just going to see you first anyway? Something to think about. Now, something else kind of cool about these, in addition to the low production number, they were around $44,000 brand new. Now, the year is currently 2022 and $44,000 is just below the mean average of a used car sold today, which is around $45,000. So, not a lot of money. These in low mile, good condition like this usually push in the mid to upper 30s. So you could say it held its value rather well compared to, you know, other cars. But in 2001, $44,000 was equivalent to today's $73,581. So now imagine paying just under $75,000 for a two-seat roadster with a rather unimpressive V6, nothing in the way of, you know, really cool performance-y features, magnetic suspensions or anything along that, just essentially a bumper car with a V6. That's kind of why they always look cool. They were always poster cars, but they didn't sell a lot. And this is true of a lot of weird cars from, well, any era, is that there's just not broad appeal to them. Everybody thinks they look cool, largely. Some of these are polarizing, but nobody really wants to dump the equivalent of $75,000 on one of these, because in that price range, a lot of other things open up for you. Now, one of the things I want to show you on this is, we know it's a puny V6. I mean, nobody says, cool V6, bro, ever. That's just not a thing. But presentationally, it looks pretty good in here. Just imagine if it were a V8. Now, I have heard that you can get a kit to toss a Hellcat motor in here, and that sounds cool, but it also sounds like death. Here we are in the engine bay. As you can see, kind of a cool presentation. You've got a little picture of a cat, the Prowler, on front of the motor there. 3.5 liter V6, 24 valve, roar. You know, not terribly impressive, but it looks nice. The intake manifold there, well done. It's not just covered in just a sheet of plastic like everything is nowadays. You got some roll bars, you got some strut things going on. Not a ton of room, but there is definitely some room for improvement, especially because you can bring it forward and all you have down in here is, let me get this camera down here, is suspension things and a battery. Now, yeah, you need the suspension stuff there, but everything else is kind of moving around, and that's usually where the Hellcat kits come in. So, the rear end of this thing isn't huge, but it is bulbous. Now you think, wow, look at all the space we have for storage. But you'd be wrong. Under here is room for the manual convertible top, and what you'll see is space for a finely pressed suit, or perhaps a slice of cheese. Maybe your vehicle's title could fit in here, so if you do races, you'd be ready to pink slip that sucker over. Or, you could maybe get a flat Stanley in here. That's it. There's no room. Look, I'll move the convertible top up here. And look, there's still no room. With the top up, you could maybe get a small book in here, or, I don't know, an infant or something like that. But that's it. Well, now you're going, wait a minute. Okay, so there's an axle down there. The wheels are huge, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be at least a little bay in here where you can put stuff. Well, sharing similarities with the C5 Corvette and the Porsche 944, the transmission is right here. Weird spot? Sure, but you've seen the car. There's not a lot of room for anything else. You've got the engine, you've got a torque tube going to the transmission, then it's delivering power to the wheels. Not a dissimilar setup from any other car, just positionally maybe a little weird. But it's also what helps give the car its nearly perfect 50-50 weight distribution, which is cool and which you can tell when cornering and, playing with it a little bit. Not that you're going to be doing that fast in the V6. And here we are inside the car. Now, it's got a pretty cool cockpit experience. I think most of it has held up pretty well in the last 21 years or so. It's got center laid out gauges. Now, they're all angled towards you, the driver. Right above it, you've got two banks of informational lights, low tire, passenger airbag, that sort of thing. And then right in front of the steering wheel, you've got your little tachometer. It just kind of seems like, oh, crap, we forgot to put a tachometer in there, so let's bolt one on the top there. But no, that's the way it is. The rest of it, a little wonky when you're driving to be glancing over every time to check your speed or other gauges, but it's something you get used to. It's not all uncommon in the world of automobiles to have center-oriented gauges. The rest of it, it's got a decent stereo system. Something a little cool is it has a tape deck, as well as behind the passenger seat is a 6-disc CD changer. Now, that's not the worst spot for 6-disc. A lot of them ended up in the trunks or underneath a footwell or something, but this one's behind the rear seat. So if you want to change your tunes and you got a passenger, they're getting booted. Something else cool is this car also came with air conditioning in addition to the rather decent stereo. Air conditioning, power windows, power locks, power mirrors, cruise control, and a bunch of other regular features that you'd find in the car. Something that the Dodge Viper did not have, at least in this era, which, makes it maybe a little more practical than a Viper. So, yeah. Poe is a big fan of Prowlers as well. Aren't you, Poe? Is that a good Prowler? Yeah. He has to get in all the cars. It's what Poe does. Thanks for tuning into another episode of My Favorite Things. This one's kind of a special episode for me, and kind of like I said, is I've always loved these cars. I remember when they came out, and I remember thinking, wow, that looks like a Hot Wheels car. Not something that's real, something that's just a concept that actually happened, or something a kid would buy, because it's weird, it's cool, it's impractical. You'll never really see anything like it short of the exotics world, maybe a modern day Ariel Atom or something like that. But from a regular manufacturer in normal mass production, you'll never see it. It just doesn't cater to the masses. And that's too bad. It represents an era where manufacturers weren't scared to just go out on a limb and make something cool. That doesn't happen anymore. Nowadays, they just make special trims with different rims and maybe some graphics and added suspension and stuff, but not special models. They're just not doing it. That saddens me a little. What also saddens me is this car is sold. It's gone. Right after we're done filming here, we'll be loading it into our trailer and I'll never see it again. Which, you know, I don't like that. I'm gonna miss having this car around. I'm gonna miss looking at it. It's inspirational, looking at the lines, the designs. You can see the passions that went into it. You can see the heritage that it pulls from. And you can't see that in most of your modern cars. Man, it's just a relic of a bygone time. And with that, thanks for tuning in. I'm Matt, we're at TXG, and these are a few of my favorite things. See you next time.